The poor girl only had $5 for a blind date. Their single dad CEO at the next table watched her under broken bar. The small café copyright on the corner of 5th and Main wasn't much to look at, with its chipped paint and flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying bee. But for 23-year-old Emma Walsh, it was the only place she could afford for what was supposed to be the most important evening of her month. She sat at a wobbly table near the window, her worn canvas purse clutched in her lap, fingers nervously tracing the outline of a crumpled $5 bill inside. It was all she had left until payday, 3 days away. Her roommate had convinced her to give online dating one last shot, to meet this guy named Derek who seemed nice enough in his messages. Emma had agreed, mostly because she was tired of being alone, tired of coming home to an empty apartment after double shifts at the grocery store, tired of watching everyone else find their happy endings while she struggled just to survive. She smoothed down her best dress, a simple navy blue number she'd found at a thrift store 2 years ago, and tried to ignore the small tear near the hem that she'd covered with a safety pin. This was it. This was her chance at something better. Or so she hoped. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Pulse for more inspiring stories that remind us of the goodness in humanity. Your support means everything to this channel. At the table directly beside her, partially hidden behind a newspaper he wasn't really reading, sat James Carmichael. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without trying, a sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. As the CEO of Carmichael Industries, a tech company worth billions, James was used to boardrooms and five-star restaurants. Not this humble café copyright with its cracked linoleum floors and the faint smell of burnt coffee. But he came here every Tuesday evening, always requesting the same corner table, always ordering the same black coffee and blueberry muffin. It was the only place in the city where nobody recognized him, where he could escape the weight of his responsibilities, even if just for an hour. Tonight, though, his attention wasn't on the financial reports he'd brought with him. It was on the young woman at the next table, the one who kept checking her phone with increasingly anxious glances at the door. James had noticed her the moment she walked in, noticed the way she'd asked the waitress for the cheapest item on the menu, a cup of tea and a piece of toaster, and the way her cheeks had flushed with embarrassment when she'd counted out exact change, mostly in quarters and dimes. He'd watched her rehearse what looked like conversation starters under her breath, watched her reapply her lipstick 3 times. Watched help and worry wage war across her delicate features. There was something irkingly familiar about her determination, about the way she held her head high despite circumstances that clearly weighed her down. 45 minutes passed. The tea had gone cold, the toast sat untouched, and Emma's phone remained silent except for her own increasingly desperate messages that went unanswered. James watched as realization slowly dawned across her face as she'd been stood up. He saw the exact moment her heart broke, saw the way her shoulders sagged, saw her blink rapidly against tears that threatened to fall. She gathered her purse and stood to leave, but as she did, she accidentally knocked her cup, sending it clattering to the floor where it shattered into a dozen pieces. The café copyright fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Emma's face burned crimson as she dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the broken porcelain with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to the waitress who rushed over. "I'll pay for it, I promise. I just need until Friday when I get paid. And miss, it's okay," the waitress said kindly, but Emma was already crying, the weight of the evening, the week, the entire past year crashing down on her all at once. That's when James made his decision. He stood, walked over, and knelt beside her, his expensive suit pressing against the dirty floor without hesitation. "Let me help," he said gently, his voice carrying a warmth that made Emma look up through her tears. Together, they picked up the pieces, and when they finished, James offered her his handkerchief, a crisp white square with his initials embroidered in navy blue thread. "Bad evening?" he asked softly. Emma let out a broken laugh. "The worst," she admitted. I thought maybe, just once, something good would happen. But I guess I'm not that lucky. James helped her to her feet and, on impulse, said something that surprised even himself. Would you join me for dinner? Real dinner, not tea and toast. There's a wonderful Italian place 2 blocks from here, and honestly, I could use the company. My daughter's at a sleepover, and eating alone gets old. Emma started to protest, started to say she couldn't possibly accept, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was no pity there, no judgment, just genuine kindness and a loneliness that mirrored her own. I don't even know your name, she said. James, he replied with a smile. And you are? Emma. Well, Emma, what do you say? Give this terrible evening a chance at redemption. They walked together through the cool evening air, and over plates of carbonara and stories shared like old friends. Emma learned that James was a widower raising a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, that he'd built his company from nothing, that he still remembered what it felt like to count pennies and hope for miracles. And James learned that Emma was studying online to become a teacher while working 2 jobs, that she sent half her paycheck to her sick mother in another state, that she had a heart bigger than her bank account and dreams that refused to die despite everything trying to crush them. When the check came, James paid without making it awkward, and when he drove her home in his Mercedes, he didn't flinch at her run-down neighborhood. Instead, he asked if he could see her again, not because he pitied her, but because in 3 hours, she'd reminded him what it meant to truly live, to fight, to hope. If you're loving this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Pulse. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that beautiful things can happen when we least expect them. Your engagement helps us spread more kindness. 6 months later, Emma stood in James's penthouse, not as a guest, but as family. She'd met Sophie, who adored her instantly. She'd accepted James's help paying for her mother's treatments, though she insisted on treating it as a loan she'd repay. She'd discovered that love didn't care about bank accounts or social status, that the richest person in the room was often the one who gave the most freely despite having the least. And James had discovered that the woman who'd sat in that café copyright with $5 and a broken heart was worth more than all his billions combined. That real wealth was measured in character, courage, and the capacity to keep believing in good things even when life gave you every reason not to. The message is simple but powerful. Your worth is never determined by what's in your wallet, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin on the pages where we felt most forgotten. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it changes everything. And somewhere, right now, someone is watching you the way James watched Emma, seeing your strength, your dignity, your light even when you can't see it yourself. Keep going, keep hoping. Your story isn't over yet.